All right, everyone. Hello and welcome to my social media project by me. Um, so yeah, here goes. I kind of changed the format a little bit. I didn't really use the template that was given, but I still got the same stuff, the same idea. So I decided to do Henry Clerval for my character. I know this wasn't required, but I did a little biography about him just because I wanted to kind of encapsulate Henry a little bit. So yeah, he's from Geneva. He's a merchant. He's just the best of buds with Victor Frankenstein. He's also pretty much a nurse. He spends a good amount of his time kind of nursing Victor both physically and mentally, which is why at the very bottom I said he's also basically a therapist. Um, so, yeah, he's an adventurer and a seeker of knowledge. Very curious. Overall, 10 out of 10, just an excellent friend, excellent guy. Something I loved that Victor says on page 117 that Henry was formed. He was a being formed in the very poetry of nature, which I just like that sentence, that one sentence description, like really formed my sort of outlook on Henry. So yeah, he's full of imagination. That's what Victor says many times. He just has this bright imagination and frequently found traversing the land of knowledge. Yeah, he just has this like eagerness to learn and to experience new things in new places. So that's Henry. I picked Samwise Gamgee from The Lord of the Rings to kind of represent Henry because, you know, Henry is such a good friend. And when I think of like really, really loyal, good friends in media, the first person that came to mind was Samwise Gamgee from Lord of the Rings. So the rest of my PowerPoint is kind of Lord of the Rings based for some of the other characters, just with their faces though. But yeah. Okay, so this is post number 1. This is when Henry arrives in Ingolstadt to join Victor in their studies. So Henry says, in spite of my father and his disinterest in me departing to Ingolstadt to pursue knowledge, I finally arrived here after an exciting journey to this wondrous town in Germany. I approached this new adventure with curiosity and unbridled excitement. However, my poor friend Victor is somewhat ill, and therefore I'm spending most of my time nursing him than actually learning or experiencing the scenery. I didn't mean to make that sound sarcastic, but that's why I added the hashtag worth it and hashtag get well soon. Because, you know, despite Henry's sort of dreams and intentions of going to Ingolstadt to kind of finally get a classroom education, he, you know, kind of has to put that aside for a little bit to help Victor. So, yeah. And here on the right, we hear Victor say, my dear friend, a mere Instagram account, or a mere Instagram comment would never express just how much you mean to me. Even in my ill health and the impending doom I've set forth in our lives, your light extinguishes my darkness like none other. You have brought back the life within me. So yeah, Henry, you know, on page 41, Victor says, Henry was my only nurse. And on page 42, it kind of implies this, like, friendship as having healing powers, almost. At least that's what it seemed like to me. And yeah, Victor, you know, having his old childhood best bud back with him, I think just really contributed to him feeling so much better. And both physically, you know, coming over his like fever sickness that he gets after creating the creature. And yeah, so I think he was just really appreciative of Henry and really excited that he was there with him, and very just so relieved to have Henry by his side. And then we have Elizabeth in this moment say, Henry, my gratitude overflows for you in taking care of my dear cousin and future lover, Victor. I'm dreadfully worried for his health and deeply appreciate you being there and taking care of him. Have him send word home as quickly as possible if you would be so kind. So yeah, Elizabeth, she, you know, throughout the section of the book, she was very deeply concerned about Victor and about his well-being and being away from home and all of these things. So I think in this moment, she was very appreciative that a familiar face was there with Victor, taking care of him and all of that fun stuff. Yeah, let me try to find. So yeah, around page 48, we get a letter from Frankenstein's father. He's like, please come home, and please, oh, sorry, that's when William dies. Hold on. My dear cousin, on page 43, you know, Elizabeth was like, please have him write a letter in his own hand. If she says, dear Victor, if you are not very ill, write yourself and make your father and all of us happy. On page 45. So, you know, she was just really concerned for him. And then this academic article that I found was really fascinating because it kind of shows Henry in this moment, you know, coming and bringing Victor back to life. He kind of acts as like he reanimates Victor essentially, and so it was fascinating to me because the only creator I kind of saw in this story was God and also Victor. And so, you know, I think without Henry kind of being there and taking care of him and essentially reanimating him from his, you know, illness and, you know, near death, I guess. And so, yeah, it shows how similar Victor and Henry are in their interests and also in their acts as well. So it was really interesting to kind of see Henry as almost like a creator in this moment, where the entire story we've seen Victor as like the creator. So I thought that was really fascinating. Okay, post number 2. My best bud Victor has finally recovered from his fever, and having commenced my studies and escapades in Germany, I feel a deep sense of relief and wonder with being in this beautiful place. Nature has an unwavering power to bestow upon every human a gift of beauty and purity like none other. I don't want to leave, but unfortunate circumstances call us back to Geneva. Hashtag needy friends are my fave. Hashtag student. Hashtag nature. So yeah, I felt bad for Henry in this moment because he got all the way there and he finally started his studies, and then they had to leave eventually because of William being murdered by the creature at this moment. So yeah, we see Victor here say, oh, dear Henry, how I've appreciated your sacrifice, my good, excellent friend. Your imaginative mind has shown its healing powers and has brought me back from a very low point. I will need you and your aid in the coming months as I deeply grieve for the loss of my little brother, William. So, yeah, he was just really upset. Victor was, you know, obviously grieving and deeply shaken by William's death. And so I think he has leaned on Henry very much recently, and I think this is no exception to that. And yeah, we see Frankenstein's dad say, "Henry, words do not do justice to how much I've appreciated you being there for my son Victor. Our family has been crippled by the sudden murder of my boy William, and we need your support back here in Geneva. Safe travels for you and Victor." So, yeah, I felt bad, like I said, for Henry, but I think there are some perfect descriptors of Henry in these moments, because we kind of see him properly for the first time as his own character. Like, he starts to learn at the school, at the university, and yeah, I think this moment is really important for their characters and for them as for Henry especially. And sorry, I'm just trying to find some things here. So yeah, and I think, you know, Henry was really trying in these moments to be there for Victor and to kind of bring him up still while he, you know, was still focusing on his studies and of enjoying the country that they found themselves in. And I think, you know, a really important part in this moment was on page 48. Is that Victor says, "Clerval called forth the better feelings of my heart. He again taught me to love the aspect of nature, and Henry treated Victor with the utmost gentleness and affection, and he just sincerely sympathized with Victor all the way through, and I think that was very beautiful to see." And then, yeah, the academic article that I found for this one talks about Henry's morality, I guess, because he was willing to make these big sacrifices in order to be there for Victor and to help him. And so I think that kind of proves how morally in line Henry seems to be, in comparison to some of the other characters. And so, yeah, he's willing to make sacrifices for those people that he loves and for his best friend. And he puts aside his studies essentially for a while, and he puts aside, you know, a lot of his own interests in order to be there for Victor. And I think that was a really, I really admired this about Henry in the story, because Henry is the kind of friend that I want, and also the kind of friend that I want to be. And so I think, excuse me, I think this is a really important point for Henry, starting to enjoy himself and his studies, but also having just put all of that aside for a while to help his buddy. Okay, post number 3. So this is when they, this is a bit further on in the story when Victor and Henry go visit England for the first time. And yeah, this is, Henry is just loving it. He said, "Oh, joyous day, behold the sky and the beauties of the world. Dear Victor and I are traveling to the Lake District of the United Kingdom, where some of the most brightest minds created some of the most intriguing stories and poems ever to be written. I could live out my days here in the mountains. Victor keeps creeping around me and shadowing my movements as if to protect me from something. Weird. Hashtag weirdo. Hashtag soon to be storyteller. Hashtag oblivion is bliss." So yeah, in this kind of time, we see Henry experiencing these new places, and I loved that line that he had, where Henry says, "I could live out my days here." I'm trying to find exactly where that is. 1 second. Okay. So yeah, on page 116, he says, this is what it is to live. As they were kind of traveling and experiencing these new places, he was just getting the absolute most out of some of these places that they were seeing together for the first time. And yeah, he was just loving everything that he was kind of seeing there, which I think was really, he was just getting like the utmost delight. And on page 121 it says, Henry says, "I could pass my life here, and among these mountains I should scarcely regret Switzerland and the Rhine." So Henry's finding these places that he is just fascinated by, and he says this, "I could pass my life here," right when they're in the Lake District, which is why I kind of picked that. And I also think, he's in this place that's rich in a history of storytelling and poetry and that sort of thing. And I know, when Henry was young, he would write stories. He would write fairy tales about like chivalry and romance and love and all of those sorts of things. So I think being in this area really inspired a lot to Henry. And also, this is the point where I did hashtag oblivion is bliss, because Henry is completely oblivious to like his impending death, essentially, and how they're running. Well, like Victor was kind of hanging around him creepily in some of these areas, because in this like portion of the story, because Victor knew that his creature was likely nearby, and and I think he knew that Henry would likely be a target for him, for the creature, and so I think he was making a point to just stay close to him and keep him safe, essentially. So, yeah. And so we see the creature here for the first time. "Enjoy it while you can, little Henry. Without your or my creator's knowledge, I follow in your footsteps day by day, monitoring Victor's work. If your dear pal doesn't comply with my demands, your neck will be mine." Poor boy. I don't think the creature is as verbally violent as I may have made him in this moment, but he definitely has this unparalleled desire for getting this company that Victor hopefully will provide for him. And I think the creature is really relying on that to a degree. And so, yeah, in this moment, the creature... Victor knows that the creature will, be close by, most likely, which is why he kind of hangs close to Henry to sort of take care of him. But, yeah. And then Victor here says, "I see versions of my former self within your eyes, and I deeply admire your excitement in gaining experience and knowledge in the places you go." And on page 119, Victor says, "But in Clerval I saw the image of my former self. He was inquisitive and anxious to gain experience and instruction. So that's kind of where I got that. And beloved friend, as you can see with the previous comment, there is danger looming, about which was birthed from my hands, and I shall protect you and your goodness with all I have. So, yeah, like I said, I think Victor knows that Henry is and could be a target, and so, wants to keep him safe, keep him close by. And then the academic article that I found for this moment was kind of about the lake poets, because I was really interested in learning more about this, and I think the characters would have been as well. And so the lake poets, I was actually kind of surprised, because there was actually sort of an element of enmity among some of the poets that were there in that time, and I was kind of surprised in that, because I wouldn't expect them to kind of be like pinned against each other. They said that there was an element of like competition, and they weren't getting along very well. So even though a lot of really rich poetry came out of that time from people like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Southey, there's still, it wasn't as romantic as it may seem, like these poets out in nature. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting to kind of look into and read about. And yeah. Finally, post number 4. So this point is when Victor decides to leave Henry and go out on his own to create the lady creature. So Henry says, feeling kind of lonely here in Scotland, Victor decided to take some time to himself to sort some things out, which I respect. I'd rather accompany him, as I feel like I'm home when I'm with Victor. However, I will respect his request and eagerly await his return. Hashtag who's protecting me now? Hashtag vulnerable. Hashtag lonely and abandoned. But yeah, the who's protecting me now part is kind of like Victor was, just now like trying to hang around Henry and take care and, make sure the creature didn't get him. And now he's just leaving Henry very vulnerable, essentially, even though he doesn't really know it. So, but yeah, something that I loved and in this part of the story was on page 123, Henry says, hasten, then, my dear friend, to return, that I may again feel myself somewhat at home, which I cannot do in your absence. I thought that was a really, really beautiful sentence and a beautiful descriptor of Henry and Victor's friendship, because Henry feels at home when he's with Victor, and it makes sense. They're childhood best friends. They've known each other for their entire lives, essentially, pretty close too. And so, of course, he would feel comfortable and he could feel like he can rely on Victor's company to make him feel at home, which I just thought that was an amazing description of their relationship and their friendship. And yeah, Victor says, forgive me, dear friend, for abandoning you. The matters at hand are too dire, and I need to sort out this dreadful situation I find myself in. Please don't try to come and find me, as I have a deathly shadow of my creation following me, and to be within the grasp of this monstrosity would surely prescribe the end of your life. So, in this part, Victor is trying to lure, essentially, the creature away from Switzerland and from his family, from Elizabeth and from his father and whatnot, and his remaining brother. And he's also trying to find, a place appropriate to be able to create the female creature. And so on page 122, Victor says, I told Clerval that I wished to make the tour of Scotland alone, and that Clerval would just kind of stay put, and Victor would go off and find a good place for himself to go and use his lab equipment and make the creature, which he obviously doesn't do, but which is kind of the reason that Henry dies, is because he's alone and he's vulnerable. And once the creature finds Victor making the lady creature, and Victor just has this sudden change of heart, tears apart the lady, which obviously enrages the creature and leads to him hunting down Henry and killing him. So kind of sad, but a really important sort of point in this story. And so yeah, on page 133, we come across Henry dead, and Victor says, other victims await their destiny, but you, Clerval, my friend, my benefactor. So yeah, really sad. But I think it was kind of inevitable. And then the creature says, to associate yourself with my creator means an inevitable death if Mr. Frankenstein doesn't satisfy my request for him to create a female version of myself. If he fails, another human life will fall victim to my hands. Watch yourself, Henry. So yeah, just like I said, he kind of became a target because I think the creature knows that Henry was really important to Victor. He was kind of up there with the others, like William and Elizabeth eventually, and everything like that. And so yeah, the academic article that I found for this one was kind of regarding the friendship, and the theme of friendship in this story, the theme of connection and that sort of thing. And so yeah, when Victor kind of leaves Henry and goes off on his own, he kind of stops fostering this relationship between the two of them, because he puts that aside. He sacrifices his friend and friendship to hunt, or to, create the female creature, and to kind of put an end to this like painful cycle of the creature kind of bossing Victor around at this point. But I think it's interesting to note that Victor, up until this point, some of his happiest moments have been spent with Henry. A lot of his best days, his best moments have been experienced when in the company of Henry. And, he always says, like, excellent friend, and just the most amazing things about him. And so to kind of put that aside just shows where Victor is at this point, and also how Henry probably did feel abandoned to some degree, even though he doesn't verbalize that, because he says that he didn't want to be left alone in these places. In your solitary, I had rather be with you, on page 123. I had rather be with you, Clerval said, in your solitary rambles than with these Scotch people, whom I do not know. Hasten to return. So, you know, I think he's probably feeling pretty abandoned by Victor at this point. But he very much does, like, you know, balance out the bad things that Victor is experiencing with all of the love and appreciation for the world that Henry exhibits and expresses to Victor. And so I think he plays an important role in kind of bringing light back into Victor's very dark existence. And yeah, so it's this important theme of friendship that drives both Victor's interests and Henry's as well. So very fascinating. I loved looking into this relationship that they have and how Henry was just having this, like, unwavering loyalty to Victor and his, you know, I wish I had a friend like Henry, honestly. So here's my Works Cited page. I've got all my things here, and yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks for listening.